Welcome to Pay Attention, a podcast guiding you from the chaos of the mind to the clarity of the heart. Here's your host, Holly McNeil.
Hello and welcome. April 15th, tax day. So I hope all of you nobody's scrambling out there to get their taxes done. So let's have a nice calm episode today. I've been on my journey for a long time, and there's two things I've really come to admire in the people I meet, in some of my podcast guests, and just being on my journey. And one of those things is for those people that kind of knew early on that there was something more, looking for that. I mean, I was 34 and it took me a long time to dig myself out, but there's people very young, very early on that know there's more than this reality that we're looking at right now. And the second thing is people that have teachers, someone to teach them along the way. I, as you'll hear in the recording, at the risk of repeating myself, I never really had that. But I did have some teachers that really meant a lot to me and helping me find my way. And today, I'm bringing one of those teachers online. Mark, welcome to the studio. How are you?
Holly, nice to be here.
Yes, thanks. We met in the studio a while back, so we'll be playing that here in a minute. Mark is in Minneapolis. Is it spring? Has spring sprung there in Minneapolis?
Yeah, we have a beautiful day.
Yeah. My son lives there. I lived there for 12 years. It can get really, really cold. So I'm actually thinking, I live in Southern California, and I've done this before. I've taken a road trip out there this summer. I just love to road trip. But anyway, Mark and I met in the studio, and so we're going to go to that so you can hear about how we met and a lot more about his work. And we will be here in the background if you have any comments or questions, and we will come in back at the end to wrap things up. So Mark, sit back and enjoy, and everyone enjoy the show. Hello. Long ago and far away, well, long ago, but not so far away. I'm in Southern California right now. I hit a really low point in the Black Hills of South Dakota, my hometown, and set off on a journey to better. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was looking for. And at one point, I got the courage to move on, and I moved to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, back to where I had gone to college. I had friends there still. And there I did Jon Kabat-Zinn's 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course. I checked out Zen Buddhism. And although I never really had, a teacher that I studied under for years, there were teachers I met along the way that really influenced my journey. And today I'm so grateful to be speaking to one of those teachers, Mark Nunberg of Common Grounds Meditation Center. Mark, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. Common Grounds, tell us, Common Grounds is in, I guess, technically South Minneapolis. It's been in the news a lot lately, and a place that's had a lot of our thoughts and prayers. But finding Common Grounds was such a grounding place for me. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to be a Buddhist meditation teacher, and how Common Grounds came about.
Yeah. Well, kind of begins where a lot of our story begins when we leave college or leave, high school and that time of life where we have to figure things out for ourselves. And like a lot of us, I came from, the conditions of getting ahead in life and being successful and a lot of that typical energy that we find here in our country, at least, and maybe everywhere. And but just being sort of a reflective person all the way through childhood, it just occurred to me, where does this striving to get ahead, whether that was, academically or athletically or socially, where does that all go? And Yeah, it didn't take too long. By 24, I was really, even though I have a lot of that ambition sort of wired into me just from my culture and my family upbringing, um, but it wasn't long before I was just asking questions that I didn't have answers for. Like, what's the point? You get ahead, you achieve this goal, you jump through that hoop, and then you just end up with another hoop to jump through, another goal to achieve. And it just started to feel like I was going through the motions that were defined by this kind of cultural process that nobody had been clearly thoughtful about and nobody really have answers for. And it was a little scary, like having to figure out, like, what am I going to do with this life? What should we be doing with our lives? And very quickly, that brought me to the question of I'm born, I live, and then I die. And we don't know, no one really seems to know what that means. I was raised as a Catholic. I had a pretty good experience in the Catholic Church as a child. And it felt relatively wholesome from my personal experience. And but it wasn't answering questions. So I started to do my own exploration around what people thought about that truth of our mortality, and that pretty quickly led me to Buddhism and other Eastern thought and the practice of meditation. And so by age 23 or 24, I started to explore meditation practice, had some powerful experiences early on, and it just became clear, oh, this is more important, seems to be in the direction of addressing some of these unanswered questions deep in my heart. And I kind of made some changes. I was working at a management consulting firm after college and sort of doing that achievement thing. And I realized, I needed a different lifestyle to support my interests. So I made some changes. I got into elementary education so I could have my summers free. I thought it would be easy. It wasn't, being a school teacher, but it did give me a lot of time. And I moved. I didn't know much at the time. I was just sort of following my nose. But I had been to Berkeley, California earlier, just meeting up with some friends. And I just had the sense there was a lot of spiritual opportunities in that part of the country.
Really?
So, yeah, so I moved to Berkeley, got my elementary school license, started teaching in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and started participating in both yoga and Buddhist practice. And sort of never looked back in terms of developing my practice, going on retreats. And then roundabout way, I moved to New York City to be with a teacher, and then eventually back to Minneapolis with the idea of having lived nearby and even inside of spiritual organizations. I really felt the support, as a layperson, to have that kind of spiritual community. So I had met my future spouse, Wynn Pricky, in New York City. We both moved to Minneapolis then with the idea of starting a meditation center.
So was Common Grounds that community that you developed, or when did you?
Yeah, Minneapolis. So by 1993, we had purchased that place. We started Common Ground Meditation Center, affiliated with the local Vipassana or insight meditation community here in the Twin Cities. And we've sort of been partners with the other insight meditation organization here in the Twin Cities since that time. So It's been about 33 years.
Wow, that is amazing. So you're part of the Insight meditation organization, which is it worldwide or countrywide, or?
Yeah, I would say worldwide. It comes out of the Theravada Buddhist tradition in places like Burma and Thailand and Sri Lanka. But here in the West, generally, we refer to it as insight meditation or Vipassana meditation, or sometimes early Buddhism. And, there's places like Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts and Spirit Rock. So those are sort of our lineage. Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg are some of the early teachers in this version of Theravada Buddhism.
Western version. Yeah, I've heard the Western version. I practiced in the new Kadampa tradition for 5 years, but really trying to bring it to a more applicable place for people in their day-to-day lives. But what you described, Mark, and especially people are so lucky when they have those questions early. You know, what you described is your journey, right? To awareness, to understanding and clarity. For me, I hit what's now known as a quarter life crisis at 34. And like I said, I had no idea what I was even looking for. And I moved back to Minneapolis in 2006. And by 9 or 10, I kind of knew that I was looking for awakening awareness. Still didn't really understand how to get there. But the beautiful part is that you don't really have to know how to get there. And then, you know, common grounds showed up. So someone, you know, starting on this path or wanting to find that clarity, it's a way of living, isn't it? It's more than just a practice.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. I mean, ideally, it's a lifestyle, but the avenue in can be, pretty diverse reasons that people get involved, and it's okay if our way in is what later we might consider pretty superficial, like we just want to feel better, or our good friend is involved and we're curious, or because sometimes just getting close to practices and some of the values, it awakens what was there dormant in our heart, like that life has purpose that we didn't earlier conceive of. I mean, and whether you call that spiritual freedom or awakening, it just doesn't really matter what we call it, because it's something deep and intuitive and embodied. It's here. And so one way or another, we want to find that. And that's going to help guide our way forward, because it is messy, especially here in the West. There's so many traditions, so much good wisdom around, basically all the depth of human history with spiritual understanding is available a click away.
Yeah.
So it's a confusing time in some ways. It's also a really rich time.
Yeah.
But having that intuition is really important, because we have to find our way. And some of us were connected already with a lineage, even though we may not know it, like something is just going to feel more resonant with us. And other traditions may be very good, but they're just not going to resonate with us. And we just have to be accepting that, hey, I've got to find my way. I have to feel what feels right.
And open. You talked about all that wisdom, from millennial old wisdom to modern day inquiry, is all available. And to me, on my journey, it started out on a spiritual path, but neuroscience, psychology, quantum physics, I mean, they're all pointing back to that question you talked about earlier, the questions you had earlier on. We're born, we live, we die. Buddha talks about, birth, the Four Noble Truths, right? Aging, death. Probably not getting this right, but anyway. But there's all pointers. It seems to me that intuition, that knowing, like you said, is there. And these are all pointers. And so it's really just kind of being open to them when they show up.
And knowing the taste, like humility is a trustworthy taste, not places where we feel certain, but places where there's that wholesome doubt and curiosity, like, this is important, but I don't know anything about it. I mean, even our heart, our mind itself, it's like we're so busy with external relationships and, just navigating our lives, that we can get pretty far along before we actually get interested in the fact that there's a knowing, sensitive heart mind here. And I haven't really used my heart mind to take a look at the heart and mind.
Yeah, you're right. You can definitely get far along. And there are people that will spend their whole life, this whole human journey, in the head, in the chaos. I call the chaos of the mind. And even when you have those insights, you're going to get pushback from the thinking mind and from all that you think you are, your identity. And I'm sure, as I did, people falter along the way. But I've found that life tends to nudge you back to your truth, back to your true nature. Do you find that in the people that come to Common Grounds, or that we're all on this journey to clarity, whether we know it or not, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess part of the question is, do we have the good fortune to not be overwhelmed by life, so that intuition, maybe we could call it, that sensitivity is actually operating? We might by nature have that sensitivity, but it might be covered up, right? It might be obscured by having a lot of stress, having a lot of difficulty, whether it's health or just being somebody who's oppressed and taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Or we might have it too easy and get distracted by our success and thinking, oh, I've got a good ride here. Maybe I don't have to be interested in this more subtle stuff.
Yeah. It does seem like people have to kind of hit, or some people have to hit a rock bottom or a low point before they ask those questions. I mean, I have talked to others like yourself who ask those questions really early on, which is great because you have less conditioning when you're younger, of course, and so less of the box to get out of.
Yeah.
But I do think you're right that it is definitely hidden, and kind of your mind, especially when you're young and there's trauma involved, right? Your whole body's in this, keep me safe mode, which hides that even more. So it's really a real wanting to know what there is for you beyond kind of the experience you see in the external world.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found very trustworthy in the Buddhist tradition, and you mentioned it earlier in our conversation, is the Buddha really builds the practice around our own experience, what he calls dukkha, but just that something's off in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not like, if we're fortunate, we're not overwhelmed by what's off, but it's obvious something's off, like something's missing. And that kind of is our guide, in a way, our teacher, this experience of dukkha or dissatisfaction.
Yes.
Because we are missing something. We're missing that, for lack of a better way of saying it, that spiritual perspective.
Yeah. That and suffering has been called a necessity, a tool to get you to search and to notice. And there are a lot of people, of course, that are overwhelmed by what's keeping them stuck. And I don't know, sometimes it seems hard to get, I guess you have to be ready, right? You have to be open enough to want to know what's in here, right?
Yeah, and some of it is just good fortune. I mean, whether you call it good fortune or whether you think it's related to past causes and conditions, but when we're really just hungry, it's hard to be interested in anything else but getting a meal, right? Or, any number of other terrible things that happen to human beings.
Right.
So then it's not even a question of spiritual qualities in an individual. It's just the basic facts of their life are just not supportive of that kind of spiritual interest in them. They're just on a more basic level wanting to survive. And so what that leaves us with, if we do have the good fortune to feel appreciative and not wanting to miss the opportunity, because things can change, you or I, we could get cancer or something else, lose a spouse or have a difficult breakup. And that would disorient us for a while. We'd be kind of caught up in the swirl of that for a while. And some of our spiritual intuitions would go on the back burner.
Yeah, well, some of ultimately the goal, I mean, it's always a deeper and deeper knowing, right? And the more you can get out of the chaos of the mind, the unraveling they talk about of the neural net of the letting go of thoughts. I talked in the beginning how I checked into Zen Buddhism early on, but It's really about trying to get out of the thinking mind as much as you can. And when you can quiet that mind, when you can find that stillness, and it's in some ways it's very elementary, but it's very, very difficult to do, is to sit in that stillness. But the more you do, the more you become familiar with it. When those challenges come up, you have more of a solid base to live from. Correct?
Yeah, and you have a different relationship with the thinking mind.
Yeah.
You know, the thinking mind is just what that aspect of the mind does. It thinks, and like you say, if it's sort of if the thinking is coming out of our ignorance, well, then it will be that chaotic mind. It won't really serve the purpose of deepening a deepening sense of well-being or peace or stillness. But the thinking mind can also be in the service of
Yeah.
healing and stillness and peace.
Yes.
But I think initially, like that experience that you talked about of quieting the mind, the first benefit is then when the thinking arises, even within a somewhat quiet mind, we start to see it from that place of wisdom, like, oh, it's just thinking. Because normally when I have a thought, when I haven't really trained my mind, I immediately identify with my thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, I am those thoughts.
Yeah.
But the more we practice, the more we see directly that thinking is just thinking. And the thoughts arise out of our habits. And some of our thoughts may be useful and wise, and other thoughts are silly or inappropriate or even, toxic. But
Yeah.
they're just thoughts in the
Yeah,
end.
yeah. In that ignorance and just unknowing, I guess, we don't even question them. We don't even,
Right.
we just assume that that's who we are. There's no separation. We're seeing life through the lens only of those experiences, which is why I love, like I said, I started in spirituality and Buddhist practices, but now even psychology is understanding how habits are formed, the neuroplasticity of the mind, and how if you're in them, even if you're fighting them, you're reinforcing that identity and those habits and patterns. So, and that's what you're familiar with. And so, with that knowing, it's like I've likened it like an ocean liner, and you're heading in one direction, and you want to start to move it, right? And it just takes time and practice to kind of retrain and create the habit of clarity and create that space of awareness so that you can see your thoughts for what they are.
Yeah. And we see that, I mean, the whole point of that stability of present moment awareness is it begins the more we can be in that place, abide in that place of presence or mindful awareness or whatever we call it.
Yeah.
Then we actually begin to discern cause, the whole conditional arising of thought, like thoughts and the patterns of how I think. It really comes from the underlying intentions, like to
Yeah.
want people to like me, or to want to have power over, or any number of underlying patterns that we have. And we begin to be able to discern which of those patterns are trustworthy, like actually leading to release and more space, more freedom in our lives, and what of those intentional patterns are really unhelpful and, like I said earlier, toxic.
Yeah.
And that's the game changer, is when we have that non-judging presence that can observe the psychological and emotional patterns as they are, in terms of whether they're helpful or not helpful, skillful or not skillful. And that changes things, because when we see something as skillful, it strengthens it. When we see something as unskillful, it weakens it. We don't have to be the person who gets rid of our unhelpful patterns. We just need to really see clearly that it's unhelpful, and that is the weakening itself.
Yeah, yeah, that is in the light of awareness, those habits and patterns, you in just seeing them, they lose their power, right?
Exactly.
You're no longer seeing life through that lens. And that is the journey, right? Out of that lens, out of that chaos of the mind, into that awareness. And the further and further you get, I guess the bigger you grow your field of awareness, the more clear those patterns are. I've been practicing for years, and when I was younger, I always thought that I would go to school and look in the mirror and I would see ugly, and then I'd go home at night and I look in the mirror and I would see pretty. And so it helped me later to realize, right, that that's what my brain is telling me. I could see from a distance exactly, that what truths and non-truths I was leading my life from. So yeah, it's the journey to liberation, really, to freedom from those beliefs. When we're born, right, we're open, and we don't even have our first thoughts for the first 6 months, and then all these things happen to us, and we get kind of lost. And so that liberation is just seeing those thoughts. You don't have to push them away or, like you said, rectify them, just question them and see them. So
Yeah, and there's like I was saying earlier, it's the thoughts are what's on the surface, but as we peel back the onion, there's sort of a deeper understanding and kind of qualities of intention that comes out of our understanding that then generates the thoughts. So what really is needing to get transformed is the deepest understanding in the heart, in the mind. And in Buddhism, we talk about that sometimes, like wrong view or wrong understanding is this very deep, mostly unseen habit of imputing a sense of I, me, or mine, this self-centeredness. And we just do it automatically because it's such a deeply embedded habit. But the more we have that stability of present moment awareness, we see the thinking, we see the intentions or motivations under the thinking, and we see the underlying self-centered views that's there. And we begin to see how that whole conditional process of that self-centered view and the intentions that flow from it and the thoughts that flow from those intentions, that all of that is just nature. It's just the habit of the mind. But when it's seen, it can be seen as not helpful. And that the heart's willing to let go. When it really sees, really feels that it's not helpful, it's willing, naturally, the heart explores abandoning self-centeredness. And we realize we feel dependent on it until the heart steps away from it.
It can be scary, right? That I, me, my. I remember,
because we know it well.
Yeah, we do. And I remember the moment I saw enough to say that even Holly, right? I wasn't Holly when I got here, is part of that construction. And then when you see that you are less of who you think you are, you're less attached to it, right? You're less ignorant of who, of the awareness of the clarity that's beyond the thought. And what I love is that this journey is available to everyone. I mean, there are, in Buddhism, obviously they talked about having many, many lives, and some people are more ready for it than others. But if you're searching for it and you're open to it, it's a journey available to everyone.
Yeah, because it just like spinning, doing the same thing and getting the same results, that's also available to everyone.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of the supporting conditions being there. And our job as practitioners, is to hear maybe teachings and supports from people like yourself and other spiritual leaders and teachers, and then checking them out in our own lives. Because it doesn't help to be affiliated with, Buddhism or another spiritual tradition or a spiritual teacher. What helps is to actually do the work ourselves, to get interested in what are the causes for suffering, stress, what are the causes for release from that stress.
Yeah, like we talked about before, everything is pointing you towards that, but it is the work of meditation. In Tibetan, the word gom for meditation means to become familiar with, right?
Yeah.
Familiar with what's going on in your mind, and eventually, when you see that clarity, like you said, you can use thoughts from a place of wisdom. Right.
Yeah.
To teach others and show others, which is what you've been doing at Common Grounds for, 33 years now.
Yeah. And this conversation, you thought in words.
Yeah.
And so presumably, hopefully, it will be useful. And if not to anybody else, the two of us, maybe, right?
Absolutely, of
And
course.
and so there is a place for skillful thought.
So if someone's listening to this right now, and people on my journey, when I was completely lost and I had no idea where better was, I was just open to it, and books showed up. I heard conversations as people walked by, a song or something on the radio, someone coming across this podcast right now, hearing it, and they think, wow, this is something I really want to look into. What is something they can do right now, or what's the first step, or what's something you can leave them with?
Yeah. Well, I think, it's hard to do anything in our life of real depth and value without sensitivity. So just understanding, because a lot of our regular habits in life desensitize ourselves. And so we're just more numb and less connected, less embodied. So just that beginning, like whatever's going to be in the direction of healing and clarity and seeing what I'm not seeing and setting good in motion, it's going to involve me being sensitive because I'm going to have to feel my way. So what am I doing that is not in the direction of being more sensitive, more
When you talk
present?
about sensitivity, you're talking about presence, about really being open and present to what's actually going on.
Right, because you know how it is, Holly, because I think it's true for all of us. We all have our ways when things had a hard day, we don't want to be sensitive. We want to disconnect, I'm going to turn the TV on or I'm going to have a drink or whatever,
Get on my
people have
phone.
their own ways.
Yeah.
And, it's understandable. We don't want to get tight about these patterns. We just want to understand that it's not a long-term strategy. Disconnecting is not a long-term strategy. Being numb can't be a long-term strategy, even though we may use it in moments, to soothe the nervous system or for whatever reasons. But the longer trajectory has to be towards being more present, more sensitive, like where we're actually feeling what we're feeling.
Yeah.
And this gets to living an embodied life, that the mind, heart, body, we don't sort of disconnect, but we move, we're practicing. This is what being aware does. We're moving through our lives, making our choices, having conversations with each other from this place of integration, where I feel my body is here too. And I feel my sensitive heart, like my feeling heart is here too, right? As well as my thinking mind. It's all here and now. And there's this wise awareness that it's here and now, this integrated, way of being.
Yeah, we could talk forever. I can tell, and I find I find gratitude is a good way, a good door. Just to start to be grateful for what you do have, and being open to,
Yeah,
stay.
because it brings us back. We feel more safe when we're grateful. Safe enough to feel, safe enough to be here. Because there's some beauty. The gratitude itself is beautiful. And that beauty, that goodness, it's like, oh yeah, I can relax. I can be here.
And then you can feel that relax, that peace, and that openness. And at first, anything when you start, or when I start, you just get glimpses of it, right? And it's quickly covered up. But just notice those glimpses, and and hold on to them as long as you can, as objects of meditation or whatever. So
Yeah, that's good advice. Just seeing the beautiful through things like gratitude.
yeah, it's a journey well worth taking, and a lot of people are ready and open to it. Some may not in this life, but others. So yeah, go out in nature, gratitude, kindness. Those are all pointers as well. Mark, thank you so much. This has been lovely. That if not for those out there listening, to reconnect with your energy and your words. Where can they find you? People want to know more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Common Ground Meditation Center here in Minneapolis, but we're online. All of my programs are offered on Zoom, freely available. We have a YouTube channel. Everything is there for people to listen to later if they're not there live. So there's a lot of opportunities to connect.
Great. Well, we'll put that banner up during the live show version, and we will have that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really nice to be with you, Holly.
Yes, thank you. All right. Back to the live broadcast. Wow, Mark. So much. And for those of you listening out there, both of us have had trouble with echoing today. So if you hear that, our apologies. But like I said, you're a teacher of mine long ago. And speaking of your teaching, I have a friend, Cheyenne Moore, who's been on the podcast, and she showed us, or she put this comment out. And I'm not showing that because she says I was glowing, but that you were so well spoken, grounding this information for beginners to feel welcome to this type of healing. She also said that she loves the peace of your words. So tell us a little bit about the people you get in to Common Ground, and I suppose you get people of all different places in their lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Some people will come because they're interested, they heard something and it perked their curiosity. And like you mentioned in the conversation that we recorded, some people hit bottom, whatever that is, and they don't know what to do with their pain and they're looking for help. And maybe it's word of mouth or whatever, or just good luck. They come in the door that way. And many other reasons too, of course.
Yeah, you said, and thank you, Cheyenne. I love Cheyenne for your comment. You said that it's really just even getting close to the practice, right? You don't have to. It's not like there's a test, or it's much more of a letting go, but just putting yourself into that situation where you can hear the words and start to take it in is a first step for someone that's curious, right?
Yeah. Whatever it is. And spiritual life, not just Buddhist practice, but really any authentic spiritual life, it has its own feedback mechanism. It feels good. The trouble is that good feeling is often subtle. And if we're distracted and more on the surface of things, we don't feel that it feels good.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what we discussed, the importance of sensitivity or presence. So we notice, oh yeah, this feels good.
Yeah, and patience as well. And patience. For the longest time, I didn't think, I'm a big believer, if you put that out there, things show up. And obviously your teaching showed up, but many, many other things. But for the longest time, I didn't, it's kind of a fake it till you make it. There's enough out there. There's enough proof. There's enough pointers that this clarity, this peace is available to everyone. And so just not giving up, the mind will try to keep, you get these new ideas and the mind's going like, what is this? This is not what we've been practicing. So you're going to hit that resistance. So really, I guess, depending on your karmic imprints or wherever you're at, or your conditions, causes and conditions, it takes, I guess some people can feel that peace more readily, and others it takes a while.
Yeah. And I think some of the learning we have initially when we're getting on a spiritual path is the clarity is really around what doesn't help, what doesn't work in our life, right?
Yes. It's like,
that.
Yeah.
We don't really know what works, but we know
Exactly.
what doesn't work. And that takes a lot of patience and courage, like to let go of what doesn't work without knowing where we're going.
Yes, and that trust was one of the last things for me, just to completely back away from everything I think things need to be, or the way I think things are, back away and trust that heart-mind connection, that part of you that's in the silence and in the stillness, because it does come through, and trust really, helped to move that forward for me.
The Buddha talks about becoming independent. And it's really that, I think what you just said is really about that spiritual independence where one way or another, our own lived experience becomes our teacher, and we have trust.
That's exactly, one way. If you start to look at your life as a teacher, what is it showing me? It will, and often, if you don't catch it, if you're not seeing it, it repeats. That's why people tend to repeat things over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And you talked about a spiritual life, and you don't have to, you don't have to quit your job. You don't have to meditate, in a cave for years, and people can live their lives and still be on this journey, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think one of my teachers, his response to that sort of question was, the biggest obstacle isn't your particular life situation, whether you've got a lot of duties and responsibilities or not. The biggest obstacle is thinking that I can't practice because of these situations in my life.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to make excuses for ourselves.
And it is exactly that. It is the thinking, seeing what you're thinking and how it's affecting your life. Because as we just said, you can use everything in your life to move that clarity and that awakening along. So.
Yeah. The Buddha had this, I think, really helpful instruction. He said something like, drop by drop, the bucket gets full. And it goes back to what you were saying about patience. Like, we can be really grateful that we can take one little step, one moment of being a little more kind with ourselves, or touching into gratitude, like you talked about in the recording, or just noticing the heart being open to the present moment. And it's like another drop and then another drop.
Yep.
And this is how we build our practice.
Yep, it's that ocean liner. It's been going in one direction for a long time. It's going to take some time and patience and gratitude and catching those glimpses. Like you said, it's so that sensitivity, growing that sensitivity, familiarity to when that clarity and those glimpses come through helps to open that. And I love also what you said about not having to fix everything in your life. If the heart can see something as unhelpful, then it is willing to let it go. That part of you, that true nature for you, is willing to let that go. You don't have to swim in it and dig in it.
Yeah. And we can actually authentically be happy to see these unskillful patterns, because seeing them is a step in the direction of freedom.
Yes. Seeing them, it's all about seeing, right? And Mark, I loved your teachings. I went there, I can't remember how many years I went to your teachings. You have general open classes, and now it's online. So if you guys felt the peace that I felt, that Cheyenne felt, find Mark's teachings online. Anything you want to close with?
Really happy to be here with you.
Gratitude. Yeah.
In our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you for circling back around in my life and joining me today. So enjoy the spring weather, and maybe I'll catch one of your teachings next time on my road trip out to Minneapolis. So.
Yeah. Have a great drive.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. And we will see you next time on Pay Attention. We have some people coming to you from overseas, mindfully coming to you from overseas. Christoph and Liesel will be joining me next week. We are 3 or 4 episodes away from the end of at least this part of the season. As you know, this is our second season. You may or may not know, and I'm still trying to get this rhythm in place. So yeah, please join us next week here. Thank you. Keep your hearts open. Know that if you want to, if you set that intention, you can find your way, and we will see you on another episode of Pay Attention.
Thanks for watching Pay Attention with Holly McNeil. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.